Hi, welcome to SorWil Solutions, where we are doing a podcast on what's going on in our community these days. This is brought to you by SorWil Technology Solutions, a Lansing business that does IT services. I'm here today with Kathryn Hancock, Marketing Director for SorWil Solutions. I'm Joe Wilson, CEO and Senior Partner. I'm also with Ken Miller, Local Communications Professional. And our special guest today is Vicky Kaaz, Commissioner for Leavenworth County. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
We appreciate you coming. This is super exciting. I know we've gotten to visit with a lot of people, and I know that there's been a lot going on with the election, and you've got a lot going on. So we're really interested in seeing and talking about what's going on with Leavenworth County in the future here. What do you have going on right now?
Well, right now I'm wrapping up my final weeks as a county commissioner. We are still actively making decisions regarding the future of Leavenworth County. And right now, the things that are happening are there are several requests for rezones that are going on, and there are protest petitions that are in place. And then we have two brand new commissioners coming on board that will be sworn in on the 10th of January.
Yeah.
And so and I'm looking forward to a future in retirement.
So that was my first question. Are you going to miss any of it?
Well, I to some extent, yes. And then I think that I'm going to enjoy much more being a citizen that's very well educated. Yeah. As I become my non-active life, because this is going to be the first time that I consider myself to be fully retired. My husband's been retired for over 10 years, and I have continued to work in some capacity throughout that time. And so this is going to be the first time that I haven't either done volunteer work or, had a full-time job in the nonprofit sector or as a commissioner. So it's going to be neat.
We talked a little bit about this before we went on air here, but your last name is Kaaz, and I know you've addressed this a couple of times during county commission meetings when there are votes and or approval of budget items where Kaaz Construction is doing work for the county and going to get paid. And I know you've probably got an elevator speech about that, but you are not involved with Kaaz Construction.
No, and I never have been. I had the privilege of being able to do whatever I choose to do in my work careers, and that has never been in the construction industry. I know nothing about the construction industry other than what I've learned vicariously. I mean, you can't help it if you've lived in a family for over 40 years, close to 50, you kind of pick up on things and you understand things. And my kids are both in the construction industry, and my husband is, and my brother-in-law, but myself and my sister-in-law, neither of us, we've always worked in nonprofit or not worked at all. So.
But you've gotten emails from people who accuse you of somehow being.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and it's rather interesting, and I have no bias, and I think that one of the things that I think is interesting is that I have recused myself, which ethically I do not have to, based on the Kansas ethics and things, because I have no ownership, I have no financial gain. But it's interesting because normally I don't even know whether or not what jobs they're bidding, and sometimes I'll find out that they bid a job. Because it's on the two jobs that they bid, I found out because it was on the agenda, not because they discussed with me that they had bid work. I mean, it's we don't discuss.
So you wanted to avoid the perception, though, when you would recuse yourself.
When I would but the perception is just, it's not correct, because I'm one of those people that if I thought one of my kids or somebody did something wrong, even in business things, I would treat them the exact same way I would treat anybody else. And that's just kind of the way I roll.
So first, let me thank you for your service over the last 6 years. It's not easy having been run for office. I understand the criticism and the public ridicule that you can get. I was told as I was running that by a commissioner, not you, that this is the hardest job for the least amount of pay, and nobody ever appreciates the work that you do. Would you agree with that statement?
It's a hard job. It's a lot harder than I ever expected. I mean, it's one of those things. It's like, oh wow, who knew? Yeah. But and I agree that it's not a lot of pay to do it because there are a lot of hours that go into making the decisions in our agendas every week. The packets that we receive and the information that we have to go over is substantial. So, but it's also, I love to learn.
Mhm.
I believe in lifetime learning. So it's been kind of a fun thing to every week, every month, there's something new to learn about and to, kind of wrap your head around.
Yeah.
I think that I would love to see more younger people become involved in the process and in, the public service.
Taking a step back, why did you decide to run?
Well, taking a step back, I was, at the time that I decided to run, I had just been laid off from the guidance center because of budget cuts, and, for financial reasons. And I didn't really have a whole lot going on. And in the past, I'd always joked around and said, I would love to do something like be a county commissioner. I had run way, way back in the day for the city, and that wasn't pretty either. So I decided that I I knew enough about some of the things that the county is responsible for that I felt like I could bring a different perspective. And so I just thought, well, I'm going to run because we're more than roads and bridges. That's kind of the way that I look
Yeah.
at it. And infrastructure is essential, and it's a huge part of the job of a county commissioner. But at the same time, we're also responsible for health and welfare issues and things like that. And so I thought that I could bring a different perspective.
The first time you ran, though, was when there were still only 3 seats.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's when Chad Shimke won that
Yes.
race. Right. So it kind of fortunately timed out when the commission went to 5 seats, you ran again. And that's when you won. Correct.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
Well, it's kind of in between because when I ran, on the ballot was whether or not there would be 5 commissioners.
Oh.
And I fulfilled Clyde Graber's a two-year
that's
term
right.
for
That's
Clyde
right. Yeah.
Graber.
Yeah.
So I ran for the 2-year term, and at that time there was on the ballot the 5 commissioners, whether or not we would go to 5 commissioners, which was kind of up in the air whether that would pass or not. So I was going to be 3 commissioners, and I actually won that and was, elected into that position. And then 4 years later, I ran again, and I was reelected.
What was it
Or
like?
2 years later, and was reelected.
What was it like running the first time versus this last time? Was it different
Well-
in the sense of like competition and like
General nastiness.
Oh, well, when I ran the first time, there was some. It was interesting because there was a lot of unknowns, and I was running against myself and 2 males, but I did manage to win the 2-year term. Then I ran again, and that was a 4-year term. And there was no opposition. Nobody else had filed. It was just me, so there was really no.
And your district had changed too, because you used to be,
Yes.
you would have been Lansing's if it was 3.
Part of it would have,
right.
yes.
Right.
Part of it would have encompassed Lansing. It was kind of an interesting thing that happened during all that period of time. But so that was pretty easy. But then we had the pandemic, and that was a really tough
Yeah.
4 years during, just the times that happened during that. A lot of adjustments and things happened. This last election was probably the most contentious. I guess that's a polite
That's a
way of
great
putting it.
word.
Yes.
and you were a part of it.
Yeah.
Yes.
We've got two of the candidates right here.
Yes.
Exactly. And I guess I would ask both of you, and I'm going to kind of turn the tables on you here a little bit, Joe. But I think in a fair way, as I recall, if I wanted to know where either one of you stood on an issue, I could find out either through a forum, websites. Of course, I would talk to both of you too. I didn't find it as easy to find out about positions in the general election, which of course by the primary, you had lost the primary, but in the general, you were there. That to me as a voter would have been very upsetting if I couldn't find out the positions of all the people who were running, who were vying for my vote. And I know you walked a lot too during your campaign, Vicky. During the primary, I don't know how much activity. But I mean, I'm sure you talk to people.
Absolutely.
So how important is that? Because as important as that is to talk to constituents, apparently you don't have to do that to win.
Apparently not.
Well, I think, in my case, I had a little bit different because I was running as a third party. I had talked to a lot of people. I started out as Republican. I talked to a lot of people who had wanted something different. The United Kansas Party, I thought, brought that. Unfortunately, I don't think the United Kansas Party did enough to advertise and sell themselves and left it on the candidates to do that, which made it difficult. We were all still listed as UNK on the ballot, and I had a number of people call me asking me why I was listed as unknown instead of United Kansas. So I think there were a couple of things that hurt me. At the end of the day, I think we've talked about this before. There was a red wave, and I think having the R behind your name trumped whatever you did.
Right.
And there's so many people who were, I don't want to say they're uneducated, but really didn't dig into the local issues. There's a lot of people who just watched TV or read the mailers and really didn't do their homework, which I think is common to many elections. And you have to overcome that.
Would you still consider yourself a Republican now, even after what happened in the last 6 months to a year?
I would consider myself a United Kansan. And I'm actually planning to meet with the chairman of the party to discuss the future of the party. Several of the candidates have been asked to. So I'm excited about the future there. And I'm hoping that we can find that third alternative. I think you and I had said this before. It seems like the Republican Party is kind of split as
Right.
is.
That was going to be the next question
Yeah.
for Vicky.
And so we've got a more of an extreme right, and we've got more of a moderate.
Right.
And where is the future of the party? What are your thoughts on that?
Wow, I think I've expressed my thoughts on the future of the party on numerous occasions, including in the newspaper. I was the individual who it was used and very effectively that I was not actually a Republican and that I had no right to be running as a Republican, that I was a Democrat. And I was just kind of taken back by that because I joined the Republican Party in 1976. And I personally consider myself to be what was affectionately used to be referred to as a Reagan Republican.
Reagan Republican. Yeah.
I use that quite a bit.
All the time.
And I could not understand how, because of making decisions that I felt were as part of my job as a county commissioner and some of the things that, that I was accused of, I just kind of found very interesting that those things were turned around and used against me. Because I have to own the fact that yes, when there was time to make decisions during the pandemic, I did make the decision to go along with the recommendations of our medical director and our health department director, and I voted accordingly. And then several years later, there came the issue of the core civic came up, and they had asked to meet with a couple of the commissioners to have discussions about their future and the potential for the ICE to be leasing or being used
For detainees.
And just to have the conversations. Well, because City of Leavenworth is part of my district, and then Lansing was one of the other commissioners' districts. The two of us were asked just to meet with them to listen to what their pitch was. That was the extent of pretty much what happened. There were some discussions back and forth about whether or not there was this was going to happen. But before anything really kind of moved in any direction, somebody caught wind that there was potential for there to be the detainees at the detention center, which was like, that should not have even been out in the public. And then that we were somehow going to just release people out. And it just kind of shocked me because it's like those decisions, those conversations had not had an opportunity to occur because the city of Leavenworth expressed that they did not want the facility to be in the city of Leavenworth. And to me, that was a game changer that said, no more discussions. If the city is not behind this, I'm not going to be behind this because this is their jurisdiction, not mine. So that kind of happened there. So
I think there was oversight on that part because potentially, had that occurred, what would have been the economic impact?
Oh, the economic impact would have been fairly substantial for the county because when they were trying to entice, I guess that's a better word, for the county to even, enter into any kind of negotiations, there was the conversation about an amount of money that would be per person who went through the facility, per, detainee, which calculated was estimated to probably be about $500,000 a year that would have been in revenue for
Per
the county.
person?
No, just
total for
yeah.
total. Okay.
What about $500,000 a year in revenue, and that was the low side, and then plus bringing back, the tax base for the property tax, because it's reduced at this point to about half of what was raised in the past through them. They used to be $1 million in property taxes, and that was cut back in half. So there were things to consider, but those were the things that, as a commissioner, to me, were responsible for going through and analyzing all of it and then making an informed decision. And instead I was trying to release the illegal aliens into the city of Leavenworth, which was like that could be nothing further from the truth.
So you see as the two biggest issues that probably hurt you the most politically were COVID
Yes.
pandemic, and siding with the health department, for lack of a better term, and CoreCivic. And really, neither of these things, you didn't have much of a choice. With CoreCivic, it never came to a decision time because of what you explained about the city of Leavenworth. And then with the pandemic, you were following experts.
Yes.
Right.
I
so
felt I was.
It leads to my question about the splintering, what we've talked about here, of the Republican Party, and a portion of the Republican Party using false flag issues and successfully,
yes, very successfully,
to hammer the more moderate wing of the party.
Yes.
So do you feel jilted as somebody who has put themselves out there politically as a Republican, the fact that your own party kind of cannibalized you?
Yeah, they came after me big time. I think that it's okay. And then to some extent, it was also because of some of the decisions. I also have to add the decisions in the budget decisions for whether or not we would be revenue neutral when that came about. Mm-hmm. And then before, whether or not we would have a flat mill or raise the mill or lower the mill. And so, I lost some people on that as well. So it's just, but that does not make me what I call a Democrat. I'm not a Democrat, but I don't consider that to be an insult. My mother was a lifetime Democrat, so it's kind of like, hey, I was kind of raised in one of those. It was like a divided family, split family. Yeah. My father was a staunch Republican. My mother was a Democrat, and I lived in that house and listened to the debates, and I used to find a lot of humor in it.
So they managed to get along.
Oh, they got along beautifully.
For each other.
Yes, they did.
Unique in today's world.
Yeah, it was just. That's why I said it was just really kind of weird.
How much do you think the discussion around Abel's Field impacted the election?
I probably can't get into a whole lot of detail on that, but I think that probably was the nail in the coffin on that. And I
need to know anything to do with it.
No, as you well know, I really had. It was kind of an odd thing to have happen because my husband and I own Abel's Field, yes. However, we did not approach anybody to sell that property, to use that property. My kids were using the property as a laydown operation for their business, and we have no financial need to sell the property. And so when we kind of got thrown under the bus, I just kind of thought it was rather interesting, and that, the arch became such a big, huge issue. Was just kind of an amusing thing because that was never part of when the property was sold to the family, which was originally sold to my sister-in-law and I. It was never said that the arch has to remain. That was never even part of the whole deal of the property. So,
is it hurtful to you that some artists that you had come and do that work on the wall that people think it's awful, or that somebody just came and graffitied it for no reason?
You know what? I believe in free speech, and I believe in people being able to have that expression. And when he wanted to do that, and it was at the time when people were struggling with the pandemic.
Mhm.
That's when this happened.
Mhm.
And I think that the words were very encouraging, and the things that he wrote and the way that he did it continued to be. I wish that he would come back again and redo it and then fix it. Kind of you know and touch it up, and he may. Who knows?
Mhm.
But
So come January, put your political consultant hat on. I know you may not want to get into that business, but I'm asking you to think like one come January when you're off the commission. So we've kind of already talked about how the Republican Party is kind of split. Maybe it's actually two sub parties now, and you have the Democrats. What does a third party success story look like? Joe's mentioned that he's going to stay with the United Kansas Party, but in your eyes, knowing the battles that you've not only recently gone through, but maybe gone through the last 10 or 15 years, what has to happen to, to have a challenger in any race in Leavenworth County be successful if they don't have that R next to their name?
I think education is crucial. Um, I believe that we have, as a commission, I think that we brought some of the things to light. Our board of county commissioners have been kind of a little bit of rebels when it comes to educating the public on various issues. And so I think that continuing to get that education out there to figure out how to expand that, how to make some of these issues, for lack of a better word, go viral so that people really understand how important some of these things are and like what is actually going on in Topeka, all of these types of things. I think that if we can get the populace educated enough to understand that there are things going on that they just are not aware of. It's awareness. And it's a bad word, but it shouldn't be. The word is ignorance. And we have a great deal of ignorance that operates, and there are people who will take advantage of that. And they're opportunistic, and they will jump on that ignorance and then use those false narratives and misinformation and disinformation. They'll do all of those things to stop people from, it's like holding the shiny object up, to stop people from really paying attention to exactly what's going on and what is important.
Mhm.
I think that we need to get in more into the schools and into the high schools so that we educate our future voters to understand how important local government is. Local government is incredibly important. And I don't think people fully appreciate the decisions that are made at that level and how important those decisions are. And that the most probably honest politicians that we have are the local politicians
Mhm.
because they have to look you every day, in the eye constantly. They're right there. They're very accessible. You don't have to drive to Topeka to talk to them. You can come, they can meet with you immediately on the phone. They're very accessible. Most of them answer their own phones. They don't have a secretary that puts them through or screens or, and the decisions are critically important.
Mhm. You mentioned education, and this is not local. This is national. And the first time I saw this commercial, I laughed out loud. And then the second time I saw it, I started thinking how brilliant it was. Former Governor Huckabee advertising like a coloring book that shows President Trump and trying to educate kids about President Trump and how great he is. You're aiming that at kids who are using coloring books. So, what do you think about that as a strategy?
Actually, the National Association of Counties has a coloring book,
Okay.
and it's available to be used in schools so that kids can begin to learn about local governing at the local level. Do I think that it's a good idea to use identifying a specific politician? I'm not quite so sure how I
Mhm.
like that. But just the concepts themselves, I think that if we can get kids thinking and understanding how that works, I think it's really important. I think that my grandchildren, I have two grandchildren that live right across the driveway from me. And they're up at the house a lot. And so they've learned a lot just by asking me questions. And they're at middle school, and they've been in elementary school and middle school and high school since the
Mhm.
period of time that I've been a commissioner. And I think that they have learned some of the things just by listening.
Mhm.
And the coloring books are pretty cool. I brought them off to, I had them for some homeschool kids. I had brought some from a conference, and then I gave them to one of the commissioners to take when they were meeting with some homeschool people and said, here, take these. These are really cool. So they're available.
It's interesting that you say that because isn't one of our concerns today that we're indoctrinating kids in school? Didn't that come up during this election?
Yes. Yeah.
So, I mean, should we be just talking about generalities or should we be pushing President Trump's coloring book?
Do you see both good and bad with that effort, though? The good, and I think you kind of explained it with the Kansas Association of Counties having a youth activity. But on the flip side, I don't know how much the Trump packet and coloring book is pushing anything besides President-elect Trump. So you're getting people more involved in the political process or learning about it, but at what cost to promoting one specific candidate? Like, are we going to see a Joe Wilson coloring book next time?
Not in the future, no.
No,
Digitally, maybe. SorWil,
Yeah.
right?
but I think that if you want to educate people in a way that attracts, you use what it is that speaks to them.
Mhm.
But I think that we have to get people educated in civics when it comes to local things at the local level, because they can spill over into every other level of
Mhm.
government. I mean, it shouldn't, I don't think the framers of the Constitution ever intended for things to be top down. I think they always intended things to be from the bottom up. And we have gone so far away from that. One of the things that I can give an example that I thought, wow, that was very Republican of me, was when we were looking at and talking about whether or not to have a director of economic development for the county. I was completely opposed, 100% opposed, because that was another level of government that just was not necessary. It was, to me, a waste of taxpayer dollars because we had an organization in place. So let's go public-private. Let's find partnerships where we can actually work together. And so that was but I was outvoted on that one. And I considered that to be one of my, I was kind of like, that wasn't very conservative of my fellow commissioners. I'm not trying to, it was just, we had a difference of opinion in an approach.
Mhm.
But I just thought it was kind of interesting because I am fiscally conservative, and a lot
Right.
of people think that I'm not, and I actually am.
Now, admittedly, 2020 hindsight, it turned out not to be a great position creation because right now the position's been suspended. It's not filled, and probably doubtful that I know you're not going to be a commissioner next year, but it's doubtful that that position would be brought back at 150, whatever, $200,000 a year that it costs to fill that position. And not a knock on the person who held that position, but your initial thought about this is kind of a waste of money was actually correct.
Well, I just kind of felt that because I think that when we have the Port Authority and the LCDC in place, we have some incredible talent in place. Of those boards that actually give it, the number of hours that they put into and the input that they give is incredible. And and we have a staff that is partially paid by government dollars, but the other part is paid by private dollars. And I think that seems to it's like, if it's not broke, don't fix it. And if it's not working exactly the way that you want it to, tweak it. Don't just throw it out and not do anything with it. That's my opinion.
So pull back the curtain to the point that you can answer that question. Why was it suggested in the first place? Was it political retribution against the existing agencies?
Do they not want LCDC around?
Yeah. Why did it happen in the first place?
That I actually had an answer for that, because it was kind of like on the radar when I started, that 6 years ago.
Mhm.
And I knew that there was kind of a thing that said they just really didn't, I don't understand what happened and why. Honestly, they thought that there were not enough outcomes, is what I was hearing. We're not seeing anything, producing anything for the money that's being invested. well, a lot of things, and that had been in existence for a long time.
Right.
But I kind of was, and then they were going to abolish the Port Authority.
Right.
I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I see, and I claim credit, and I'm going to own the credit for the Port Authority change. Was I said, instead of getting rid of the Port Authority, let's expand it. Let's give representation to all of the cities, the municipalities, and allow them to have representation instead of abolishing it, because then more people are at the table to discuss the future of the county, not just the city of Leavenworth
Right.
and the county. And I think that it has worked out semi well, but but there's still that movement, and I don't understand it. I don't know, because
it seems like from an outsider, and you're more in tune with this than I am as an outsider, but it seemed to me like it was about control. And if the county had an economic development employee, the county has more control. County gives a lot of money, and still to this day, although less, gives a lot of money to LCPA and LCDC, right? But it's less than it was. And back 6 years ago, the county really was by far the main contributor to keep those organizations afloat.
That's correct. And I think that it was about, some of it was about control. But I think that there's better ways of that's just my opinion. And interestingly enough, I think people don't really understand how little we communicate with each other as commissioners, because we can't. We literally can't. The conversations that are held about those things are in the work sessions and in the county commission meetings. You kind of see that's
you
what
guys have to be careful. You can't even all be in a car together at a parade.
Right. Yeah, we can't talk about anything that has to do with the business of the county. Now, two of us can, but then we can, and we do not. So I never know where somebody's coming from and what their motivation is. I really don't. And we can sit in the meetings and we can begin to infer where we're having differences of opinions, or, where we're not agreeing. But all that happens right out there on Front Street. If we don't communicate ex parte or whatever we don't do it. It's just because the county commission got into trouble for it years ago. And so it is part of it's ingrained when we come in as a commissioner. You do not talk to the other commissioners about business.
Yeah.
Now you can with two. And so we have, and there's kind of differences where every once in a while you pick up the phone, but then once you have talked to that commissioner, that's it. You can't have the communication. And we are honest enough that if one of the other commissioners has already made contact with, like, say, Commissioner A already called me and Commissioner B picks up the phone and says, what do you think about this? I will say, I'm sorry, I can't give you an opinion. We'll have to talk about it in the meeting because we've already had that. I've had that discussion with someone, and we take it very, very seriously. And in 6 years, I've never known that to be violated.
So you think they'll still take that very seriously, even with the
absolutely.
Republican Party?
Yes, I honestly.
I think that's why you have an attorney sitting at that table.
Yeah,
too, during
we also
Right.
have an attorney that
Right.
sits but we also we don't do it. I would pray that would never change, because that's what we have to trust. People have to trust us, and they should be able to trust us.
One of the things I think is really great about, and you kind of mentioned this about LCDC, is that there's private partnerships, there's ownership from the public that is part of the process, and it gives more representatives out there trying to drive economic development in the county, which you don't have if it's just the governmental entity. So I think that's one of the great things about it. Huge supporter myself. I talked about it during my campaign that we need to be working with them, because it's so inclusive of so many different organizations.
Right.
Let's talk about the big topic, the thing that I probably talked about the most during the campaign: property tax. What can we do so that we're not paying as much property tax?
Oh, well, a lot of that can't be done at the local level. That has to be taken care of at the state level. And those are decisions that have to be made by our legislature. At the county level, we're kind of stuck with what we have to fund the governments, both at every level. I think it costs what it costs to run the government, to run the city, to run the county, to run the fire departments, anything that's out there, the townships, there is money involved. Therefore, the money has to be collected. How it's collected in order to fund government, currently is through the property tax. The property tax. And it makes it very difficult because it's going to cost what it costs. The more people that you have coming into the community, or the more businesses and things, it's spread out more for people to pay less. I think that we have to figure out ways of, and we can't, it has to be done by the state, for people that have more economic challenges, that own homes or property, that they have an ability to stay in their homes, But the best thing that we can do is to figure out a way at the state level to make different pools, so that it all isn't coming from one source. Because right now it comes from property tax, and there's a small sales tax that's helping to build the roads that was voted for by the voters. And that's the only way to get additional funding at the local level, is we have to put it on a ballot. And these days it's interesting because of some of the dynamics that happen. The success of certain initiatives on a ballot, you never know. It's a coin toss. And if it fails, then you still have bills that have to be paid. So at the state level, they could do things like, we had the local ad valorem, which was part of what started in the 1930s, moved on into the 60s, and then was trashed in the 70s, and then it's gone now, is the local ad valorem, a way of trying to handle some of that relief. And that was through sales tax. That there was sales tax collected, and a portion of sales tax could be returned, or would be returned, to the county, because originally the county collected those taxes. And those were kind of referred to as the sin taxes. It's tobacco, alcohol, but and then there's gasoline, but kind of the sin, what they could, it's affectionately called that. And Leavenworth County, well, if we could keep the money, we have a lot of people who smoke and drink in Leavenworth County too. I mean, my past life was a prevention specialist. So,
right,
I studied,
understand. Yeah.
and I looked at what are our risks, and how many liquor stores, and how many bars per, and all of these things, the population, how many people actually smoke, and and it's like, wow, we really could, we can clean up if we could get back that 1.5 cents back into our county. But the state governing bodies, in their infinite wisdom, decided that was a good way of holding on to that money, was a good way of balancing their budget, because they have to have a balanced budget. And so when they were running out of money, it was kind of easy picking. So we don't get that. We should. It's still being collected right now, and they've gotten rid of the requirement. So why are they still collecting that money?
Yeah. Hey, to me, and Commissioner Jeff Culbertson brings this up often, how much of Leavenworth County is exempt because it's federal land. And I think you guys are working on an agreement so that when the county provides medical ambulance medical care, that the feds will chip in to help offset some of that cost. And it's probably going to be a drop in the bucket, but it's a move in the right direction. That's, really outside of maybe Sedgwick County, you guys are getting hammered on that.
We are hammered, and that's, I was the first one that began to educate Commissioner Culbertson on it, because writing grants and learning about things, and the lack of what we have in our community are, because of the number of exempt properties, is just phenomenal. And one of my things when I become a civilian person is I am going full force into Michael's housing. I want something done at the federal level to do something about Michael's housing, because Fort Leavenworth has all of these houses now, which was fine. I grew up when I was a teenager. I lived in one of those homes. That's cool. But it became privatized with Michael's housing. And so this is a multi-billion-dollar corporation that pays no taxes whatsoever on the properties that they own at Fort Leavenworth.
You used to work for them.
Well, but they pay zero taxes. And that's like, okay, fine. That's still, but it's housing for the military. So
except it's not housing for the military
anymore. It's not. Right. Now they have opened it up, and anyone, if they can pass a background check, can rent from Michael's housing. That is appalling to me that they are still sitting there as a tax-exempt organization drawing in, all of that income and not having to pay a dime on it on the properties that are there. And I think that is ridiculous. And what does that have to do with whether or not Fort Leavenworth will continue or not? And nothing.
Mhm.
Fort Leavenworth's going to continue whether or not Michael's Housing has to pay taxes or they don't. And so that is because that would bring us in billions of additional revenue.
So I know we could talk
We could go
all
for another
day,
2 or 3
hours
hours, yeah.
easily. We've
Yeah.
kind of gone,
Sorry.
a little longer than usual. No, it's an honor for us to talk with you. You've got great insight. We're going to kind of shift to a lighter topic. What's on your mind? And
I don't know if
we
that's
do this-
lighter.
As long as we're not talking about the Jets, I think you're okay. But we'll start with Ken. Ken, what's on your mind today?
Well, and I think most people know me know that I grew up in New York. And it's been fascinating to me the last week watching this manhunt for the gentleman now who's been captured, who shot the CEO of United Healthcare. And I guess what interests me, having grown up in New York, my parents were still there for 9/11, the whole 9 yards. So I'm connected to it, even though I've lived in Kansas for 30 years. You've got probably as many cameras per square inch in New York as you do maybe outside of London, as you would anywhere else in the world. And you're the digital IT expert here. Did it get to a point where there was so much coverage technologically with cameras and data that has to be sifted through that it helped this guy escape for the 6 or 7 days he was on the lam and to get to Pennsylvania? Is it too much information and that it didn't help law enforcement?
Or did he just know how to avoid it?
If he knew how to avoid them, he also didn't know all that much about staying.
Which is really
Right.
interesting.
Yeah.
This is really interesting
Yeah.
because I just read a conspiracy theory on this that he did everything very cold and calculated, yet made several missteps in order to be caught. So do we really want to go down the conspiracy rabbit hole right now?
Yeah.
Because this could take another half hour to go through.
Right. But I'm asking you from a technological standpoint. I've seen a couple of opinion pieces that talked about, is it too much data? Is because you can have all the video feeds in the world, but don't human eyes have to look at it to then make some assumptions?
But not today. With the use of AI and
Okay.
the information that can be inputted into a system, the computer with the artificial intelligence
Okay.
can sift through that data
So when he
much
pulled
faster.
down his mask, that was his fatal mistake. Is that what you're saying?
If that was really him,
Right.
yes.
Right. Okay. Right. It's alleged. He's an alleged.
He's an alleged.
He's alleged at this
They
point.
haven't
Okay.
filed actual charges yet, but that's true.
He's on his way to New York to get that now. Yeah.
Kathryn?
Depending on when this comes out, Mayor Holly Pittman takes office.
Yeah, Mary Holly Pittman takes office.
This week, I believe, right?
Mhm.
Tonight, yeah.
Tonight.
Tonight. So, yeah.
Congratulations to Mayor Pittman
yes.
and all of her work in community service, which actually leads into my topic because this time of year is all about giving back. I think as we talk about Christmas, I was at Dylan's last night ringing bells and just talking to people as they're making donations. It's such a great time of year, such good feelings when you see people are, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, whatever religion. Everybody, it seems at this time of year is the one time that we start to put down our defenses and we really come together as a humanity and really look to help those who need help. So that's one of the things I really love about this time of year. And I love ringing bells for Rotary. And I'll actually be out there next Monday in front of Dylan's if anybody wants to come by. Well, we open it up to you, Commissioner Kaaz or outgoing Commissioner Kaaz. What's on your mind?
Well, same thing. I love our community when it comes to the philanthropy that exists in this community is incredible. We have some of the most generous people in our community that it rivals pretty much any other community in the country. I honestly do believe that. The generosity is amazing. And I look forward to being able to continue some of when I'm not on my winter breaks, doing some volunteer work. I'm a huge advocate for CASA. And I have been so since its inception. So I'm very much behind that organization. and the, you know, Richard Allen Cultural Center, and then, just some of those things that I really hope to, and the Guidance Center. Can't leave that out. I'm always going to be a supporter of behavioral health in general, and I hope that people will take care of themselves during this time because it can be very stressful. And the reason for the season is not to be stressed; it is to really just celebrate living and family and community and all those things. So keep that in mind. Don't get stressed out. There's there's it's not worth, you know, all of the dressings are not worth what you as a human being. You are the most important aspect of our community, and people need to remember that at all times that they matter. They always matter.
That's a
And
great message. Not what I thought you were going to talk about. You just had a recent life event, though. The birth of
oh, I get to give you
I
Yeah.
thought maybe we should
I
give a
was
shout out.
Yes. Little Alexander Jordan Jr. came into the world in October, and this is going to be his first Christmas. And I'm a great grandma now,
Oh,
which is
wow.
just
Yeah.
totally
Yeah.
awesome.
Congratulations.
I love that. And so we're going to that's why we're spending Christmas here instead of heading to the Florida Keys. But right after that, that's where we're headed. But yes, and just everybody take care of themselves. That's one of my.
Well, I want to say that I want to express my admiration to the two of you. And you've been through several races, and I know you went through your first race this past
Hopefully
summer
not
and
the
fall,
last.
hopefully not the last. And I think you learned, and I know you've known just how much effort you have to put into it, money spending, the time, and you helped on the campaign too. So you know that whether you're Democrat, Republican, left, right, whatever, I mean, I think we all need to just understand how much you guys are putting yourself out there and working so hard. And you're obviously not even guaranteed to win. And just, it just seems to be getting harder and harder. So the effort that you guys put into it, I appreciate it as somebody who kind of follows the business of politics. Um, you got to put yourself out there, and you did. And kudos to you for doing it.
Well, thank you. Let me just tell you what. I had the best campaign manager on the planet, social media person. Kathryn was out there with me at every event. She took pictures. She managed me in places you can't do it alone
Right.
because your time is there. There's so many places you have to be, and I'm
Yeah.
sure you experienced it as well. I mean,
How many
everybody
boards
wants
are
you
on?
there.
Mhm.
Everybody wants you to talk. Everybody wants you to be
Yeah.
involved, and there's just so much more expected of you.
Yeah.
So yes, I couldn't have done it without
Thank you.
without the help of Kathryn Hancock. This is SorWil Solutions, brought to you by SorWil Technology Solutions. We talk about events in our community, about what's going on in the world, and a little bit about technology in itself. Thanks for joining us today. Thank you, Commissioner Kaaz, for being here.